Now we are going to talk about the Ice Trilogy by Vladimir Sorokin. And first of all, we have to dive right in and begin with his personality. Vladimir Sorokin is quite a popular Russian writer, one of the top Russian writers of the period. And he was born in 1955, and after graduating from Chemistry Institute in Moscow, he tried to follow some low-qualified occupations, after which he landed within the Moscow conceptualist circle of painter Ilya Kabakov, where he started practicing belles-lettres, the creative writing, and painting. So he gradually, slowly achieved some popularity and became rather popular within the country and abroad through the so-called samizdat and tamizdat, the self-publishing and the abroad publishing of Russian dissidents in the late 1970s and early 1980s. By the millennium, Sorokin has become one of the top Russian writers, and nowadays he remains one of them, residing permanently in Germany. But his creative works are mainly popular in Russian and in the Russian language space or the world literature. Speaking about conceptualism, which has remained one of the top themes in his creative work, conceptualism posits that an author's idea or concept can be embodied, can be materialized through any object whatsoever. So, a conceptual artist may use ready-made objects to make his ideas or concepts come true. So, this was the means for Sorokin to create his own universes, as I have chosen to call that, his own universes, which are constructed out of pieces and out of whole layers of the Grand Russian literature and of the Soviet and post-Soviet realities. So this is the main object of his work, to embody the ephemeral constructs of Russian literature, Russian reality, Soviet reality, and to make them a piece of art. This is almost the same that he makes in his paintings, and my last slide is devoted to one of his paintings just to show that. Sorokin's style is really hard to manage for the reader because it's emotionally rather touching and rather hard for the reader to read. It is characterized by the cliches, usage, materialization, and inversion, top absurdism, because all universes created by Sorokin are absurd and border on Ionesco's creative work and some other classic absurdist authors. Also, it is characterized by language play, mix, and invention. He invents lots of languages and uses absurdist languages, meaningless phrases and whole paragraphs to try to convey some idea or some character he has created. Also, he usually uses narrative in narrative, like pieces of art created by the characters of his literary pieces, and so on and so forth. Some Sorokin's novels are presented to the reader as old manuscripts found somewhere, and so on and so forth. Also, one of the main characteristics of almost every his novel is surveys the angel-like essences or characters who are out of the world created in this particular piece of art and conveying some idea about this world, about this universe. Also, which makes it even harder for the reader, is his aesthetics of disgust, the inversion of all feelings, because many of his works are filled with rape and rampage, murder, mutilation, and massacre. And it is really hard to read for everyone, but it builds the sort of special aesthetics which can be taken or done away, because You just have to accept Sorokin as he is. He manipulates the reader because it's just a snap of the fingers that he makes the reader cry or laugh or ironize and so on. It is so a kind of quest to read Sorokin's novels because he brings every reader through a sort of torture, I must say, just to convey some idea or concept he has in mind. But everything I mentioned above comes to pieces when we come to the Ice trilogy, which started in 2002 with the Lod, the Ice novel, which was succeeded by the prequel and sequel, two more volumes in 2005, and all the trilogy was published in 2005 and very soon translated into main European languages, thus gaining worldwide recognition. So this Ice trilogy is not completely different, but partially different from all that I described above, from all Sorokin's disgusting realistic universes. Other Sorokin's universes are devoted to mixed and oxidized Soviet literature, parodized and paraphrased sometimes, and Soviet everyday reality cliches. His first popular novel was called The Queue, a very characteristic Soviet aspect of life, which was made into a novel, The Life of a Queue, the life of the people in the queue, and so on. Also, the other Sorokin's universes are surmounted and oxidized Russian literature of the golden age of the second half of the 19th century and silver age of the remote ages, 19th to 20th, and filled with the cliches. He parodizes the style of famous Russian writers like Tutor and Dostoevsky and the authors of the silver age also, the most occult epoch in the history of the Russian and European literature. Also, he has written several novels about the futuristic, absurdized post-Russian, post-Eastern European realities after the probable crash of Russia, following the example of the Soviet Union and the republics and monarchies that appeared on its place. Everything devoted to these themes was executed by him in the style mentioned above. But the universe of the Ice trilogy is completely different. And here, just thinking and rethinking and trying to understand why it is different, I clung to the theory of Tsvetan Todorov, Paris-based Bulgarian literary studies and historian of literature specialist who tried to structurize fantasy and sci-fi and developed the system of several types of fantastic. So the futuristic and quasi-Soviet Sorokin's novels tend to the unusual fantastic étranger, according to Todorov, where surrealistic events and aspects get at some point realistic explanation without changing the general rules of the realistic narrative, while the universe of the Ice trilogy is almost classic fantastic realism, according to Todorov, the fantastique merveilleuse, the miraculous fantastic, which means the surrealistic events and aspects are declared realistic and natural within the narrative. The author is the god, the creator, therefore he declares the rules, and these are the rules that allow the surrealistic events and aspects to appear. So this is why the Ice trilogy is quite different. Now it is time to describe the plot of the Ice trilogy, and it starts with quite a mystic essence and event, because the main characters of the novels are the quasi-angelic spiritual beings that existed in the universe and were quite agnostic in their nature because they were sparkles of the divine light that existed in this open space independently. And there were 23,000 of them. They created the universes, and they created the suns and planets, and were quite alike agnostic spirits, or on the other side, quite like the gods of the Church of the Saints of the Latter Days, the Mormons. Sorokin has never mentioned any religious or spiritual allusions in his novel. It was purely belles lettres. But I, as a religious studies specialist, can compare. So they, according to some unknown reason, were banned from the space by the creative light, by the good, and sent to the earth in the form of pressed piece or lump of ice that fell upon the earth as the Tunguska meteorite in 1908, the very famous event in the history of Russian civilization. Ice fell into the earth and entered its soil. The water of the Siberian swamps hid him from people. Permafrost helped preserve it. Ice has been waiting for you for 20 years. He lies under you. He is yours. He was sent here from the dying universe. In it there is salvation, writes Sorokin. And then these spiritual sparkles that are hidden in the eternal eyes have to call for the people to come there, because the sparkles of the eternal light are dispersed in the universe and enter the flesh, the bodies of humans. And this eyes calls for them, and they should come to this Tunguska River in the Siberia to find this lump of ice, to cling to it, and therefore to have their hearts woken up. So the term to wake up is very characteristic for any initiation. And the premonition described by Sorokin says that these people shall wake up after a long hibernation, and their true nature will speak through their hearts, and they will become one with these eternal eyes. And they represent one of the 23,000 of these sparkles of eternal light on the earth. And these people who have discovered this eternal light in their selves shall form a society, and thus bring other people to realize their internal nature. And therefore, this society will be all brought together, all the 23,000 of them, for the goal, which is in itself to bring them together, and this will make them return to the open space and resume the life they used to have before their grand fall. So all this legend replicas and represents and maybe parodies the well-known legend of the grand fall of the man. So the means of this revival of this waking up is the waking up of the heart, because the heart is the central symbol, the heart of ice, which shall wake up and shall speak and will say, will pronounce its true, eternal, and out of space name. Which is also quite interesting in terms of the initiatic traditions of the world. Now we have to speak about the initiation, and therefore reiterate the characteristics of the mystical experience according to some scholars. Mystical experience in a religious or a profane context is the one that immediately or subsequently interpreted by the experiencer as an encounter with a higher or ultimate reality in a direct, non-rational way that engenders a deep sense of unity and of living on a level of being other than the ordinary, and is accompanied by far-reaching consequences in the individual life.
5 minutes.
Excuse me. Stages of mystical experience are direct mystical experience, unexpected and life-changing. consequences of the primal vision that changes the life of the subject that can take choices, context specific, and these choices may lead to ritual dimensions, religious traditions, constructions of techniques, and the intellectual stage interpretation. Here I provided several quotations from the Ice trilogy, but they are better be sent afterwards because now I'm not matching in the time. So it describes the process of initiation when the members of the Society of the Light find some personality who matches their descriptions and in whom they see or hear their eyes of heart. And after striking this person in the breast with an ice hammer, they whip his heart or her heart up and make him or her join their society. These quotations describe this process, and this initiation is ultimately equal and resembles very much the process and the precepts of initiation in many well-known secret societies of the history of the world, in the mysteries of the antiquity, and so on and so forth, because they require the prerequisite of being internally initiated, well prepared, concept of hibernation and being woken, involuntariness. Pain and blood is method, of course, period of adaptation and osmosis, reflection, rethinking of the new state of the body and mind of the initiate. Then sudden catharsis, peak of emotional disbalance, repentance for the sins made in the previous life before waking up, and suffering, which is followed by insight, enlightenment, and total awareness. So Sorokin recreates mystical experience par excellence, as it is in his novels. This society of brothers and sisters of light is absolutely alien to the environment, which is characteristic of an ideal secret society, and this characteristic was failed by absolutely every secret society in the history. They are united biologically and voluntarily by their essence, which can be changed, like race, nation, or background, and voluntarily, socially, by traditions, vegetarianism, ritual, political working. They are utterly distinct from the surrounding public, the albino Nordic gods, and innerly because they have the para-angelic essence. They are hostile to environment and only use the surrounding people, the society, for their own good. They are characterized by opportunism and penetration into the power structure authorities to make their society prosper. The very distinct and only goal of them is to get united, to get all the 23,000 together. And here the goal justifies the means, the fine justifica i mezzi. They kill the people, and there Sorokin also uses again his stylistic of disgust. They are aware of outer interaction, but absolutely lack compassion or empathy to people. Their ritual structure includes small circles of light which help them literally live physically because they live on the energy of one another. And they all are precursors of the great circle when all the thousands get together. They have common structure, old members and seers, those who see the eyes of heart in people. They are clairvoyants with special powers to see, and their circles, specialized groups providing security, terrorism, safekeeping, handling, accommodation, and mentoring of the newly initiated, financing, Medicare, and so on. But when they get together, all the 23,000 of them in the end of the last novel, Sorokin brings them to an isolated island in the ocean. They form the great circle just to get united, to exchange all their energy, and thus to re-enter the outer space, to become again the sparkles of the godly light. But something gets wrong, and they all turn into stones, and that is it. So I personally do not understand why Sorokin killed all them. It just like he got exhausted and tired and bored by the plot and just wanted to end it up. Because this esoteric, this secret society was absolutely ideal. It was par excellence. It could conquer the world. It really could dominate all the universe and realize their eternal goal. But they did not, and he did not explain why, as well as he did not explain why they were brought to Earth through the Grand Fall. So it was his concept. He's a conceptualist. Maybe it was his inner thought to make so. But this lack of logic just reiterates the fact that this secret society, as an ideal one, could not have place in the real reality, not the reality created by this author, but even he submitted to the laws of logic and laws of the physical world. So we kissed them goodbye, said, "Oh, beauty must die," and bent down and planted a rose in their tears. So this was the history of the ideal secret society. And then I just want you to meditate looking at one of Sorokin's paintings of this perpendicular Dostoevsky. This is it. Thank you much.
Thank you very much for the interesting paper. When we speak about esotericism in literature, we often tend to focus on some very obvious authors, and some others stay under the radar. And it was very interesting for me to hear more about, unexpectedly, about Sorokin. I wouldn't think about Sorokin and esotericism, and this was very interesting in that sense. I have a small question. It's not that much about esotericism, properly speaking, but since his trilogy obviously has a kind of a mythopoetical structure as creating the myth about Genesis, how would you define the relation between esotericism and mythopoetical in his work?
Between esotericism and, excuse me, what?
Using the mythical narratives in his trilogy. Because his story obviously resembles the myth.
Of course. I've spoken that one of the traits of his creative work is creating a narrative in narrative. So one of the narratives used in this trilogy is absolutely mythological. And the bridge, the passage between the narratives within his trilogy are a sort of mystical experience, because what is mystical experience in practice, if not a passage from our reality to the reality of a myth? And therefore, just to cross this border between the reality of reality and the reality of myth, one has to change. One has to become a mythological character, a mythological personage. And therefore, Sorokin creates this bunch of characters who are quasi-human and naturally mythological. And this is what, as I think, makes his trilogy a sort of esoteric novels and sort of mystical experience for a reader.
Thank you. We have a question by Dr. Gautam Chakravarti. Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Спасибо большое, Много хвала, for this very interesting conference. I'm no stranger to either Moscow, St. Petersburg, or Belgrade, for that matter. So it's a great pleasure to be in a conference which is in both in Russian and in Belgrade. So I'm very so thanks to Sergey and to you, Nemanja, if I may call you that, for this conference. Thanks for this paper. And I have actually taught in Erkegea many moons back in 2008 for a semester in St. Petersburg. So your paper brings to my mind certain discussions which revolved around Russian Orthodox Pravoslav traditions, cognitive traditions, or shall we say epistemological knowledge traditions, and also their sort of how they are worked into Soviet realism for one, and then also post-Soviet modernism, if we may broadly call it that. Now, Sorokin's very interesting. He sort of, as you also, I believe, pointed out using Todorov, he weaves technology or technological futurisms or futuristic scenarios, dystopic scenarios also. I don't want to mention a certain book of his, which is probably quite controversial nowadays, but he's always been very interested in dystopia. But from your paper, it seemed, and this is what I feel too, it seemed that Sorokin combines technological futurism, both positive and negative in terms of utopianism and dystopianism, with deep philosophical, metaphysical, theological speculations and theological undercurrents. And in this, I'm sort of wondering if we might compare him with Kurt Vonnegut. Now, if you've read Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, where the ice motive is very strong, in the sense, I don't want to give the end away for students who haven't read it, but in Cat's Cradle, ice, especially at the end, plays a very important role. And ice is both the end and has the promise of a new beginning. Now, would you say that this focus on ice, which is also there in Cat's Cradle by Vonnegut, is something which links autochthonous Russian Orthodox Pravoslav traditions of looking at the austerity of the cold? I mean, there is some writing, if I'm not mistaken, about the austerity of the cold. The solitary meditations of the monks, for example, in Salavki and other places like that in winter. Do you think that tradition plays into Sorokin's thinking? Because Sorokin, I don't know if he's still so, but at least he was baptized into the Orthodox Church, and his writings have reflected a deep Orthodox, shall we say, a deep Orthodox current. Спасибо большое. Thank you.
Actually, what I think is that we have to think wider about the ice concept in the philosophy and literature of Russian, of Soviet, post-Soviet, pre-Soviet Russian civilizations, because, we live among ice. It is really a core aspect in our life, and many writers in our country have used ice as a philosophical symbol, and not only the Russian Orthodox tradition, but our civil tradition also uses ice. And I totally agree with you concerning Vonnegut, because Sorokin, as a widely educated literary worker, of course, must and should have Vonnegut in mind when writing about this, because it is unavailable in this sort of work. But I'm not quite sure about Russian Orthodox Solovki traditions, because I have never mentioned in his works, never seen in his works any deeper Orthodox church sense. He may have been interested in Russian Orthodoxy, as we all are, but not to the point of writing basing on the Russian Orthodox postulates. But one tradition which has not been mentioned is the Nordic tradition of the ultra-right traditionalism, which was quite popular in the 20th century, and after that, after Dugin, it was quite popular in Russia. And traditionalism with the Nordic theories has been quite well covered by the press, and it is on the tongues of the discussing representatives of intelligentsia in Russia during a long period of time, so it could not miss Sorokin's mind. So here we have lots of currents which are mixed in his head and also used as it is supposed for a well-known conceptualist to provide for his concepts, and used only as means, as forms, and pieces of a mosaic to get them all together.
Thank you, Evgeny
May I-
Leonidovich.